Hey, welcome to tonight's live where we are going to be talking with Melissa from Sea Breeze Florals all about adding Bokashi composting to your composting regimen. And let's get some housekeeping out of the way real quick. If tonight you want to follow Melissa, you can click on the drop-down menu at the top where it's got the title of the live, and that'll show you everyone that's watching the live, including Melissa and myself, and you can hit follow there. And if you have a question, I ask that you please put it in the question bubble at the bottom of your screen, because that will allow me to make sure I see it and I don't miss it. A lot of times the comments get lost in the shuffle. With that, let me go ahead and introduce Melissa, tell you a little bit about her. She and I connected on Instagram because of our mutual love of composting. We have been in each other's DMs talking all things compost, compost tea, all of that. She's located in British Columbia and she grows flowers and vegetables, and she's been composting for several years. And she just recently added Bokashi into her composting regimen. And so I'm super excited to talk to her all about how that experience has gone, anything she would do differently, things she wished she knew before she started it, and hopefully it will encourage you, whether you're new to composting or you've been doing it for years, to consider adding this extra type of composting into your regimen, because it does allow you to be a completely zero food waste household, which to me is like the biggest reason to do it. All right, with that, let's go ahead and bring Melissa on. Okay. Hey,
Hi.
good
Uh,
evening. I love your backdrop. It's much more aesthetically pleasing than mine.
Thank you. Yeah, we're an ocean-themed house here because we live in the inlet of Port Moody, and so from our house we can see the ocean. So
That's awesome. We cannot see the ocean. I'm very jealous. We're gonna dive right in. I already did a brief bio introduction on you, but I would like you to tell me um, a little bit just about your basic compost journey, how you got started with just regular composting, how long you've been doing it, all of that.
yeah, for sure. So I'm relatively new to composting. I started in 2021, and it just kind of fell into my lap because I had expanded one of my dahlia beds, and then I brought soil in and I planted my dahlias, and like they didn't grow properly. The same dahlias were right next to the other ones, and they were really short, and clearly there was something wrong, and I didn't know how to fix it. And so I took a course on restoring soil health, and that was a game changer for me. It really just opened my eyes to the importance that the microbes play in in helping our plants grow and thrive. And so Jo at Root Shoot Soils, she taught the course, and yeah, so from there, I actually started working with Jo to help guide me on improving my soil's health. And it started with just analyzing the soils and their microbial populations that were present. And no surprise, my soil was struggling. You know, I would just been putting synthetic fertilizers down, and yeah, so it was an eye-opening experience to say the least. And one of the things that we started doing, she was learning about thermophilic composting, and so hot composting. And I built my first compost, thermophilic compost, a couple of years ago, and that kind of slowly started the ball rolling for like getting me interested in composting, and like forming that great rich compost. Is I was using that to form my compost teas, and those are inoculants that you spray on the leaves of my plants. And then also I did compost extracts, and those are applied to the soil. And so those are some of the things that I started doing. But then I built a 3-bin system similar to the one that you have, and with that I was able to get into static composting. And I had 1 bin for the thermophilic, holding that, and then 1 bin for wood chips. And Yeah, and then the next year I was like, oh, I'm gonna get myself into worm composting, and that went a little. I bought myself a hungry bin, and if you're not familiar with that, I got to get one of those. Those are like the flow through composting system with the worms, and I'm gonna get a second one. I'm setting that up now, and then Bokashi happened.
All right, so I don't want to dive into Bokashi just yet. Like, wouldn't you say once you start composting and you see the
Yeah.
results, it's quite addictive?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I never thought I would be one of those like in crazy, I mean not crazy, but enthusiastic composters, like we eccentric. We just once you start it, it just like quickly escalates for everybody, it seems, that starts using the product on their soils.
Yes.
So
I totally agree. And I think people who haven't done it, they can't understand the enthusiasm and the fervor that we have. Like,
yeah.
why is this person getting so excited about the temperature of their compost pile? They just don't understand. But to me, it is the single best thing you can do for your garden. Do you agree?
100%. 100%. And yeah, so many different aspects are not only are you able to just directly add compost, as I was saying, you make the inoculants. That's a game changer. I just can't speak highly enough about composting. And before, like over the last couple of years before I did it, I don't know how I made it without compost.
What were we even doing? I don't know.
Casting fertilizer down and wishing for the best.
I know, it's so hard because as gardeners, we mean well.
Yeah.
And until you've been educated, until you've like done it hands-on, you don't necessarily realize that some of your well-intentioned efforts are actually working against you in the long run. It might be a quick fix, but like the long run, and I think we're all in it for the long run, it's really quite detrimental.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, so let's start with like what is bokashi, because I think bokashi, it's such an odd name. It's a Japanese term that means like fermented organic matter, but because it's this strange name, I think people are like, "Ooh, what is that?" So let's do a brief overview of what bokashi is and what it is not. So bokashi is a fermentation method, and I actually believe that calling it bokashi composting is a bit of a misnomer, because people might assume that once this bucket of kitchen scraps is composted or done, it's ready to be spread in your garden. And that's not the case. It should be labeled as a pre-compost input, meaning it has to undergo one more step before it becomes that amazing soil amendment that you are in search of. And it does allow you to completely compost, ferment all of your kitchen scraps. So it allows you to be a zero food waste household. I put bones, raw meat, cooked foods, oily foods, dairy, everything in my bokashi bin. And the secret ingredient is what allows you to do all of this is something called Bokashi Bran. It's a microbe inoculated bran. It might be spent rice hulls. It might be spent beer grain, but it's been inoculated with these microbes, anaerobic, meaning without air. And so once it's sealed up in a bucket with the bran, the microbes ferment the food. And so when you open the bucket at the end, it's going to look almost identical to when you put the food in. It's not going to look like beautiful, rich, brown garden hummus soil. So people need to understand that. Did I forget anything?
No, I think that sums it up right there. Yeah, it's the name definitely it has a bit of mystery to it that kind of just maybe turns people away from it a little bit, because you're like, oh my gosh, that sounds really complicated.
Yes.
I'm not gonna do that. I'm just gonna stick with my static compost and or worm composting or whatever, and just keep with that.
That is the perfect jumping off point for my list of questions for you.
All right.
So the first question I have for you, you've already answered, which is like, what got you into composting in general? It was that, batch of soil and that dahlia bed that just wasn't performing the way you wanted it to. So I want to know having been composting since 2021 with success, What made you decide to try Bokashi?
Um, so if I was to just step one part back,
Yeah.
like I was holding off getting into Bokashi because I just kind of, there was so much on my plate and it seemed complicated. And I had been integrating all of these new composting processes into my system to grow my dahlias and cut flowers. And it had a lot on my plate. And those processes, if you really want to dial it in, are quite complex. If you're trying to drive a compost that's more fungal or bacterial and in nature. And hot composting I do once a year, so it wasn't dealing with the green material that I generate from our property. And I wasn't able to put in my scraps from the kitchen, for example. So I thought, okay, great, I've got a static compost, and that'll deal with it. But if you live in an arid environment, you're dealing with rodents, you're dealing with raccoons and coyotes, and we've got bears and we've got cougars in our neighborhood. Like we've got it all. And
Sounds
I,
like a zoo. So
yeah. Oh yeah, and there's lots of eagles overhead too. And yeah, so like with all of that in mind, it does limit what I can put into my static bin. Um, and so I thought, okay, perfect. I've closed the loop with my worm composting bin. That wasn't the case. If worm composting, having that hungry bin, it is very complex because it's animal husbandry. You're having to care for these worms so that you get an output that you can use. But then also on top of that, there's certain food groups that they don't like, citrus or anything in like the Solanaceae family, like the potatoes, the peppers and tomatoes. You kind of avoid those ones. And so I still wasn't closing the food loop and in our house, and I really wanted to be able to do that. And that's really what got me into Bokashi. As you said, like you can put pretty much anything in it. And I think that's a game changer for a lot of us, especially if you don't have a lot of space. It doesn't take much to have a Bokashi set up.
so a couple things that you said
Mhm.
I want to touch on. So like the idea of closing the food loop and being less wasteful in your household, I think even if people aren't super passionate about composting, I think most gardeners care about the planet and they want to reduce what they're sending to the landfill and what's creating methane gas. And I would like to point out that um, people think, okay, so if you're adding your food scraps to your compost and it's breaking down, aren't the food scraps I'm sending to the landfill getting, breaking down and turning into compost? And no, they are not. The way landfills work, they end up breaking down at such a slower, the food scraps break down at such a slower pace that they end up releasing greenhouse gases into the environment. So sending your food scraps to the landfill is not awesome. And figuring out how to be a zero food waste household in your home is so much better for the environment. So you answered my other question of what kept you from trying Bokashi. So it sounds like it seemed a bit complex or intimidating to you. Does that sound right?
Definitely. And I think, when you start to watch some of the content, when you don't have an understanding of Bokashi, and when someone tells you, okay, you're going to take your food scraps and you're just going to put them into a bucket, you're going to sprinkle some Bran on top, which of course is inoculated with microorganisms, but nonetheless, it kind of sounds like you're going to create like a bit of a biohazard in a bucket, and then you're going to get a useful product out of this. I don't know. In the beginning, it just kind of seemed a little bit.
Like, right. It seems like too good to be true and also
Yes.
like super disgusting at the same time, which is why like several times when I open my Bokashi bucket, I will stick my face like all the way in there to show people that like there is a strong smell,
Yeah.
right? But it is like a fermented food smell. So like kimchi or pickles or sauerkraut, like it's just very vinegary. What has I'm jumping ahead to a question, but like what has your experience been with the smell and how would you describe it? And I'm talking about once it's fermented.
I would say that it's definitely like when you open up a bokashi bucket that's been sealed for the 3-4 weeks, it hits you. It's pretty strong. It kind of smells like an off apple cider vinegar sometimes. It's every load is different. Because it depends on like what you're putting in there. I had one load that I put in there, and there was a lot of pineapple because it had gone off. And so I put it in there, and then I had just downloaded it into the compost recently, and I was like, it smells like a sour, like a pineapple sour beer or something. Like it was, yeah, it was just really potent. But I don't think it smells that bad.
I don't either. I will say that as I'm filling it, so the bucket sits, and I'm going to ask you where you keep yours, but the bucket sits and you add your kitchen scraps as you have them. So I keep a countertop container on my kitchen counter. And once that container is full, I add that to my Bokashi bucket, which is a 5-gallon container. I'm going to ask you about yours in a minute. And then I sprinkle some bran on, and then we close the lid, and then we wait till the kitchen container is full again to then go add some. And I have to admit, when I'm opening the bucket to add to add kitchen scraps, the smell's not awesome. Like it's not fermented yet, right? So it is like food that's going bad, but you're only opening it for as long as it takes to flip a container over into it, sprinkle some bran, and close it back up again. So how have you found that part to be?
Honestly, I find that process, it doesn't really smell that much, to be honest. But that being said, it would probably depend on the material that you're putting into it as well, right? But like, I don't know, maybe you kind of just get used to it, but like my Bokashi setup is in my kitchen. I've got, and you're right, like when you crack it open and you put the food in there that you've had in your compost caddy, and I don't find it to be overly smelly. But that being said, the other day I have a little West Highland Terrier, and she was so excited to see me, and I had the Bokashi bucket open, and she was running at me, and all of a sudden she just like jams on the brakes and like walks away. So I guess that's kind of an indication that maybe it was a bit too strong for the dog. So
That's interesting because when I crack a bucket to add to my compost pile, my golden retrievers come running. Like that fermented food thing, they're just like, what? Oh, they are so into it. And I have to make sure to bury it really well. And I'm lucky my bins have sides, so my dogs can no longer get into it, but they would be very interested in it.
Yeah, no, I do not have to worry about that with Teddy. She wants nothing to do with it, nor does she want anything with the earthworm bin either.
So you answered my question. You keep it in your kitchen.
Yeah.
Do you have it like under the sink? Like where do you keep it in your kitchen?
It is, yeah, it's just in the open. It's not overly tasteful having like 5-gallon white buckets with like a yellow gamma lid on top, but like I've got the two of them sitting there right next to the worm bin. So, it is what it is, right? I don't mind it. It doesn't smell.
Yeah. No, it doesn't. Okay, but let's say it is a gamma lid, which is a very special type of lid that is like a two-piece system where you have a bucket and there's a lid ring that fits very tightly over the top of that bucket. And then the gamma lid has a gasket on it and turns into that threaded ring that you put on the bucket. And it is an airtight seal. So if you're trying to Bokashi without a gamma lid, may the force be with you. All right, I want to back up just a little bit. You've told us a little bit about where your Bokashi bucket is. I want you to tell us exactly like all about your Bokashi system. Like, did you purchase a bin off the internet? Did you make your own? How many buckets do you have? Does it have drainage holes? Tell me about your Bokashi setup.
Yeah, so with my setup, I made it all. I know for sure that you can, at the garden centers, they have the Bokashi ones, and those ones are, they probably sit on the counter, and, they have the little drainage spigot where you can drain the leachate. But with mine, what I have is food grade buckets. I was told to go that route because of how acidic it is. Those buckets would hold up longer.
Okay.
And so I've got a bucket within a bucket, and the inside bucket has holes drilled into it so that the leachate can collect below. And I wanted to go that route because I don't know the types of food that I'm going to be putting in it. And so far, I've been finding that I collect quite a bit of leachate at the bottom, which is great. Um, so from there, I have the gamma lid on top. So as you mentioned, you've got the seal, and then you've got the lid that twists on. And then I also use an airscape lid. And that is, how would you describe an airscape lid? It's got a handle on it and allows you to depress it, like push it down through the
It's
bucket.
it almost has like a plunger like
Yeah.
action where you squeeze the handle and it like sort of contracts. It allows you to push it way down in the bucket, and then you release the handle and it expands a bit to create a seal, or sort of a seal.
Yeah, like from what I can tell, it's a pretty good seal, not as tight as like the gamma lid. But what I wanted to be able to do, because it was my first time, I was like, I don't want to screw this up. And like I ended up using that instead of like the cardboard that you use on the top to keep the air from touching the food. And so I also obviously have the trusted potato masher for compacting the food down. And then the brand that I use, I purchased Bran, the EM, and it's from a company called Terra Flora Soil Works. Pardon me, that was, and yeah, so he's located in Chilliwack in British Columbia, and but my question for you is: have you ever made your own bran before, inoculated bran? Because I haven't done that.
I haven't, but I want to. I'm always like wanting to try new things and also save money. Um, I haven't, but I want to. It sounds like you might want to
I
also.
do. I think the reason why I've been holding off is one, I don't have the time to do it, but two, I really wanted to develop like that comfortableness with this system before I go and start messing with it, so that I know where I've gone off and like, oh, it doesn't smell right. There wasn't enough the brand wasn't inoculated properly. Okay, well then I'll restart, right? So
Yes, I totally agree that when you're new to something, reducing the variables that can go wrong is always a good thing until you feel super comfortable with it. And then you can start
yeah,
changing things and working with things. Let me ask you, how large, like what volume is your bucket?
those are 5 gallon buckets. So when it's completely full, it's about 40 pounds
Oh, you
each.
weighed yours. I've been wanting to weigh mine.
Well, so I run two systems. So like one I'm currently filling, and then I have another setup identical to the other one, and that one is the one that's fermenting. And so our property is all like terraced, and so I was kind of curious. I'm like having to carry it from the bottom up numerous flights of stairs. So I wanted to know how much it weighed, so I got on the scale with it.
Yeah, they're heavy, and but it like makes you realize, like, look at all the food waste, like how heavy this is and how quickly our family produced it. Like, we're a family of four, and we're not wasteful people, but imagine every household on like your street producing that much food waste going to the landfill, and like you just feel so good realizing that like that heavy 40 gallons worth is not going to the landfill.
Yeah, and like for us, it takes us about a month to fill one bucket. And I will say though, where I live, like we can put our green waste. So we've got green waste containers, and we're able to put food scraps in there. But it is composted. But what I want to be obviously is I want to hold on to that. Why would I pay for the composted product when I can at least try to generate a little bit more from my property as well? So
Exactly. And that's an amazing service they offer. We don't have anything like that, but it still is going to use like there's trucks using
yeah,
fossil fuels to pick up that stuff. So there's still a bit of an environmental impact, despite the fact that it is net positive,
yeah.
versus if you were doing like it all yourself. Okay, so you have two buckets. They have drainage holes. What do you do with the leachate?
Well, the leachate right now, I've been just putting it into the static compost. I pouring it directly in, but I was kind of rethinking that in terms of I was told that you can dump it straight in, but I think it might be a better idea to try and dilute it first and then dump it into the compost. And I started thinking about it because I had some compost worms that were about, and if you're dumping a product that's like a pH of like 4 or something, 4 or 5, like it's really low, and you've got earthworms that have got like the what is it, mucus or like the slime coat on the outside, like they're probably incredibly sensitive to their environment, right? And you're going to dump like a liquid on them that's acidic. So that's kind of has me pausing a little bit and how that might impact them. But
okay, so I love how thoughtful you are. That's amazing. I hadn't thought about that. So when I like you, when I started, I was very nervous to get everything right.
yeah,
So I created a bucket because all the commercial buckets you see for sale have a drainage spigot. And they tout like you can use this leachate to fertilize your houseplants and to fertilize plants. I have personally never done that just because I'm nervous. I don't know exactly what it is. It's not an extract or a tea. It's a leachate. So I don't know. It's like a mystery liquid to me. And I have had people say they have great results using it, but because it's an unknown to me. I'm too nervous to use it. And I have since switched to all buckets. I have 4. 3 of my buckets have no drainage holes. I just am careful to do like a thick layer, not a thick layer, but a little bit extra bran in the bottom of the bucket before I start filling it. And I'm just mindful of like, wow, that's a lot of pineapple, which is, liquidy. Let's see if there's any stale crackers or the popcorn my son didn't finish. And let's make sure to add that in to help absorb some of the liquid. So I have gone away from the drainage holes. I still have 1 bucket with the drainage holes, and that's only because I can't get the gamma lid ring off of it and I don't want to get rid of it. Do you think you would ever move away from the drainage holes?
I mean, I could see trying that. I think most of my loads have been more on the wet side.
Okay.
I haven't necessarily, not because I've been choosing to not put it in there. I just don't have any, haven't been putting like bread or like those ingredients that are on the drier side to take out that extra moisture. I think probably what I might do next time is when I've got that extra leachate, I might just instead of just like dumping it like straight in, I might just dump it on top of the bokashi and let it kind of like drain through it and try to like reabsorb back onto those particles, onto the like the decomposing material, and that might kind of help to dilute it a little bit more. I mean, because the last bucket I had, goodness, I probably had like 2 liters of like leachate.
Okay.
Like it's a lot. So like when the bucket sits within the bucket, you've got that gap, right? Like I had probably about like 3 inches worth of leachate. So it was a lot.
Okay.
And that being with regards to that, one of the things that I've learned is that you've got a 40-pound, 5-gallon pail, and you fill it to the top. You've left your leachate in there, and then you got to try and like pull it apart. Good luck with that. With the weight and the vacuum of it, it's just like you cannot separate them. Not well, and not without creating a mess.
How about it's impossible to do it in any type of attractive manner? It's like getting the bucket between your knees and like bending down and being like, it's not attractive. So I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. There's some definite lift with the knees and engage your core muscles before you lift that bucket.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let me ask you this. How do you feel like the learning curve has been?
So in my head, I overcomplicated Bokashi. I really did. Like when you get into doing Bokashi and you start doing it, it's really quite a simple process, right? Once you've got your setup, you're just tossing the bran in, putting your material in, ramming it down to compact it, and toss some bran and then seal it up. And of course you've got the cardboard or the airscape lid on top and seal it, and that's it. But the part that is really hard to wrap your head around when you're learning Bokashi is that like we're all taught when we do composting, whether it's static or hot composting, worm composting, those are the ones that I do. There's probably a couple more methods, but like they're all the complete opposite.
Yes.
You know, you're taught you need oxygen for those processes. You don't want to have it compacted. You need to take into account the type of ingredients you're putting in, the carbon to nitrogen ratio. You need to think about the what else?
The air and the water.
The air and the moisture content, and there was one other thing I was going to mention, and my brain just like left me mid-sentence. That's awesome. I love it. And with all of that in mind, like we are taught that anaerobic composting or any anaerobic conditions is not going to create, it's bad. Yeah. Like you're just taught like don't create anaerobic conditions because your compost won't succeed. And I wish that when we are taught about composting processes that you are taught both. There's this most composting is going to fall into aerobic composting, and there is a smaller, you know, where you can do composting in anaerobic conditions. And like Bokashi, when someone tells you, yeah, you're going to do it without oxygen, and you're going to mash it down as compact as you can, and then, you know, you don't need to worry about the ingredients that you're putting in. Put anything in it and have at it. You know, you're like, what? This is not what anybody taught me, right? Yep. And that was really hard to wrap my head around. But the more that I learned about Bokashi and the type of the reactions that are occurring, and again, I learned it at a high level. I couldn't go into the molecular level of what's going on, but like you learn that you're not creating that biohazard in a bucket. You're creating that, you know, acidic environment, which is going to create a useful product, and it's also not going to have like the bad bacteria forming in it, right?
Right.
So like, yeah, I just think that there is, the learning curve, it was really just more that I just overcomplicated it based off of what my experience is in trying to learn aerobic composting.
Okay. So now here's my question. I have it. Well, let me go to this question first. What does your family think of it? Do they think it's gross? Are they on board?
I think they are on board with the concept of that. We're not putting, actually I'll step back. The scraps from the kitchen that have not been making it into the system, we have to put those in our freezer because we can't put them outside because of the bears.
Okay.
They go after our green bins, right? And so they support the fact that we're generating less that is having to go into the waste reduction, and it's not going into the composting system. But I think initially they were pretty suspicious and were like, are you sure about this? Like, okay, have at it, you know? And then I've kind of enthusiastically, come smell this, right? Yeah, this is great. Look at this product. Look at the white mold on top. Isn't this wonderful? And they're like, yeah, that's nice. Okay. You know, or the smell, and they're like, get it away from me. But as gardeners, I think if you're enthusiastic about it and you know the product, how it's going to benefit you, it's just magical.
So I used, like, during the winter, okay, let me say this for everyone. The microbes that are going to be doing this fermentation process, they're like us in terms of they like temperatures like us. So they don't want to be in super cold or super hot temperatures during the winter. And well, actually not during the summer, but during the winter, my bucket comes in and they are in my dining room. And agreed, I have like blaze orange buckets with black lids and bright blue buckets with white lids. You can on Amazon get like beautiful pink buckets with white lids, which my friend did. And I'm like, oh, that would have been smart. But they were in my dining room for 4 months and not one of my family members knew, like, because there's no smell when the gamma lid is on. One time my husband happened to walk down the hallway while I had it open and was adding scraps. And he goes, what's that awful smell? And I'm like, it's my Bokashi bucket. And he's like, you have those in the house? I'm like, they've been here for 4 months and you didn't even know.
I think I think that's completely true. I don't think if I told them, they would have been none the wiser. They probably, what are these buckets? What's in
Yeah.
them? And I could have, I don't know, said something else, and they went, okay. You know, you
So
can't tell.
tell everybody when, because there's several things you can do with the Bokashi ferment when it's done. What do you use? Like, how do you use yours when it's done and finished?
So right now, the way that I've been finishing the Bokashi compost is to put it into my static compost, and that has been amazing to just mix it in there. And but I know that there are other ways that you could do it, like digging a hole and putting it down, like covering it. Primarily, most of the yard is like planted, so it's a little bit harder to go dig holes. And besides, I dig enough of them with like planting dahlias. But like, um, yeah, the static compost is the main one. But I know that you've done the soil factory.
Yes. So you can, like, I just have some like old giant, like Rubbermaid tubs, and I'll take soil from planter boxes, grow bags, like ceramic pots on my deck. After they've been through a growing season, they're such a small volume that they don't have a lot of the microbial activity that you find in a garden or raised beds. And I will add them to a big Rubbermaid tote that I put holes in the bottom. I sit it outside. I add some of this like depleted soil. I add my Bokashi. I add some more soil, more Bokashi, more soil. I pop a lid on and I sit it outside for at least a month, usually longer. And then by the time, and then I mix it all up, and like you can't find any food chunks. It's all degraded, decomposed, and the soil just looks like so much happier. So that's how I use that one way. And then I add it to my hot compost pile because I have trouble generating enough nitrogen, enough greens. And I can tell you, nothing has heated up my hot compost pile. Like, you're really good. You get your piles really hot. Mine has always struggled, but the moment I started adding Bokashi, like, those temperatures skyrocket in 72 hours into the thermophilic range. And it's like, ah, like, so I'm sold on Bokashi forever. And but you can also, like you said, if you've got a spot that you're not getting ready to plant in for 6 to 8 weeks, you can bury it in a trench, like in your garden bed. And then just before you plant, like, you dig down and just make sure there's no identifiable food scraps still there. And then you can plant. You just need to budget that like 6 to 8 weeks of letting that aerobically decompose.
Yeah, and similar to what you were talking about there's Andrew at Terraflora Soil Works. What he does is he's got they're 4x4 planters, and one of the experiments that he was showing was that he'll literally bury the Bokashi, put like a couple inches worth of soil on top,
Mm-hmm.
and plant the soil blocks directly on top. So his, along with throwing in like compost worms and whatnot, and he is working with living soil. So that is what you do need to finish that decomposition, right? But he's able to the plants look amazing, and as it's breaking down, the roots themselves are kind of directing where they want to go, and Andrew's been really successful with it.
Okay, hold on. I just gotta make sure. Okay, so you're saying he will put Bokashi in a raised bed, cover it with some soil, and then go ahead and directly plant in it without waiting?
Yeah, that's what I saw recently that he had done. So,
Okay, well, I'm
but
making a note of that. So I have never done that because my garden beds are always, I can garden year round. So there's never open soil in my garden beds. So I've never actually tried it. It's just what I've read. That is amazing. That he sounds like someone I need. I actually think I'm already following him. I just need to pay better attention. I'm making a note right now. Okay. Am I wrong that I saw that you added Bokashi to your worm bin?
so I didn't add it directly to, well, I added to the static
Mm-hmm.
compost, but the worms just went like they were so enthusiastic for it. Like I just pulled out a giant chunk of bokashi that hadn't broken down. Most of the other bokashi had, but the amount of worms that was just a the sheer volume of it was there. It was
Okay, so that
incredible.
was your
Yeah,
static compost pile that you posted about.
but
Okay.
I would, now that you're asking this, I would be tempted to try and put a little bit of bokashi into the worm bin.
Okay, I want to do it too. I'm so nervous to like F up my worm bin that like, but I've heard other people do it
Yeah.
and I need to try it. I need to just like put a little in and see what happens. All
Yeah.
right, if you do it, I'll do it.
No, I'll do it. I'll do it
Okay.
for sure. And like, I think the approach though that you need to do is when you're putting something, if your worm bin is mature, it's going to be, you know, that like the microbial population will be there and you've got lots of worms, there lots of the life stages are present, you're safer to put in those more adventurous foods. But putting just a little bit off to the side, like I wouldn't like broadcast it all over the top or mix it in. I just put it in one corner and maybe just like flag it so you know where if you see them all on the top with a lid, or they're all trying to escape, or they're not eating it, well then you know that maybe it was not right.
Okay. All right. Deal. Perfect. Okay, we're almost to the end of our questions. I don't want this to go too long because I want people to be able to rewatch it, like, you know, that weren't able to join the live, and not have it be like too crazy. Okay, so I think I already know the answer, but what is the verdict? Is it worth it to Bokashi compost?
100%. I am a Bokashi person for life. And after having seen what it did to my static, I went from 50 Fahrenheit all the way up to 96 Fahrenheit in 48 hours. And which is amazing because it's still quite cold here. We get a lot of rain, and yeah, I like the idea of incorporating bokashi into all of it. It's like all linked, and that's what was the game changer for me, is that I thought that each one would be a standalone process and they wouldn't be linked. If you do bokashi, it flows into all of your other systems that you have in place. So but that being said, you know, if you only just have room for one thing, you can just do the bokashi and you've got your own system right there.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, is there anything you wish you had known before you got started in hindsight?
Uh, well, sarcastically, I want to say how horrendous the gamma lid was to try and put on. Two of us, and we still cracked the lid on it. It was horrendous. Yeah.
How did you finally get it on?
So the suggestion was to try and put a little bit of like olive oil on the inside of the gamma lid when you're pushing it down. We had like to try and reduce the friction, right? But maybe it was the style of bucket that I was using from like that was a little bit different of a shape, but it was a standard 5-gallon bucket. It should have worked. But yeah.
So did the olive oil help?
I think it did. I mean, we put like a plank of wood on top, and I was taking a rubber mallet and you know, going around. So it's not like I was using like a sledgehammer to hit it on or anything like that. It shouldn't be that hard.
No, it's hard. I actually have a video of me like trying to get a gamma lid like ring on a 5-gallon bucket, and it's strangely difficult. It shouldn't be that difficult. All right, hold on. We have one question. How much do you dilute your bokashi? Okay, well, so Jamie's little allotment is asking how much we dilute the bokashi leachate down, but I actually have never used it. I just dump it directly on my compost pile. Melissa, am I right that you have yet to do anything? You have yet to dilute it, right? How much would you dilute it if you did?
So yeah, no, you're right. I haven't had to dilute it if I was to directly apply it to plants. My memory is serving me correct. In that book, Compostable Kate, or
yeah, like 10 to 1.
It was like 500 to 1 for like a foliar spray. Like it was a very dilute solution, but I cannot remember. And it might have been like 100 to 1 for like applying it around like the base of your plant. So it's pretty dilute.
Okay. All right. So Jamie, I'm going to go to Compostable Kate. So if you guys, compostable.kate is a fantastic follow for everything composting. I will go look up what she recommends, and I have a caption ready to go for the live. I'll add it to the caption once I've found that information. But yeah, I think that wraps us up, unless you have any final thoughts or words of wisdom or words of encouragement for people who are on the fence of trying Bokashi.
Don't wait. Don't wait to get into Bokashi, and don't be afraid of it. It's not complicated. It's a pretty fascinating process to watch happen.
Yeah, I'm actually mad at myself. It took me so long. Seed and Trellis, Stacy out in California, she kept badgering me. And I'm like, yeah, I'll get to it like next year. I'm busy. Like, I'll try it. Like, I just thought it was going to be a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of learning. And it's not. It's really not. And so, yeah, like Melissa said, don't wait. With that, Melissa, I have to say, you have been a fantastic guest. You're extremely well spoken and knowledgeable. And thank you so much for taking the time to join me tonight.
Well, thank you so much. It was great to finally speak with you.
I know. We've been like in each other's DMs.
Yeah.
It's awesome to be like face to face, even if it's, over a screen.
Across the country.
All right. Enjoy the rest of your night. I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.